Seattle's evening rain drummed lightly against the windows of the airline boardroom. Megan Holt, 42, sat straight-backed in her crisp navy uniform, the gold stripes on her sleeve gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, her eyes steady, hiding the exhaustion of years spent flying across time zones and through turbulence. Around the long mahogany table sat 8 men in suits, most younger, most less experienced, but each holding the quiet arrogance of those who'd never had to fight to be seen. Across from her, Ethan Carter, mid-40s, sharp suit, salt and pepper hair that always looked rehearsed, leaned back in his chair, speaking with the easy confidence of someone who had never been questioned. "Megan," he said, voice smooth but cutting, "let's not kid ourselves here. Passengers want to feel safe when they see who's in charge. A woman in that role, it's not exactly comforting, is it?" His words hit her like cabin pressure dropping mid-flight. The room went still. A few of the men exchanged half smirks. Others looked down at their papers as if to say nothing was wrong. Megan's fingers tightened around her pen, but she forced her expression to stay neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. She took a slow breath. "So, it's not about skill. It's about gender." Ethan's smile didn't waver. "It's about perception. You're an excellent pilot, Megan, but perception matters." The meeting moved on, the decision already made. The promotion to chief pilot would go to someone else, a man with half her flight hours. When it ended, Megan stood, nodded stiffly, and left the room. The hallway outside smelled faintly of jet fuel and coffee. She walked toward the large glass window overlooking the runway, where a 737 was taxiing under the rain. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, smaller somehow, like a shadow of the woman who once dreamed of conquering the skies. That night, she sat alone in her small apartment overlooking Lake Union. The city lights shimmered off the water like broken stars. On the kitchen counter sat a photo of her father, Dan Holt, a sturdy man in his 70s, former aircraft mechanic, thick hands always stained with grease, eyes soft with pride. He'd been her first believer. Megan picked up her phone, hesitated, then dialed. "Dad?" His voice came warm and familiar through the static. "Hey, Meg, how'd the meeting go?" She tried to laugh, but it cracked halfway. "They gave it to someone else." A pause. "Let me guess. Someone who's never flown through a storm." "Pretty much," he sighed, the kind of sigh that carried decades of understanding. "You've been flying their planes for 20 years, but you've been playing by their rules even longer." "What choice do I have, Dad? I can't exactly start my own airline." "Maybe not an airline," he said gently, "but maybe it's time you stopped waiting for permission to do what you were born to do. If they won't let you fly higher, create your own sky." She smiled faintly through tears. "Create my own sky. That sounds like something you'd say." "I just did," he chuckled. "Don't let anyone ground you, kiddo." After they hung up, Megan poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The city seemed quieter, calmer, yet inside something stirred, something she hadn't felt in years. A spark. Her mind drifted back to the first time she'd ever touched a control stick. She was 9, standing on a stool beside her father in a small hangar in Spokane. He had lifted her into the cockpit of a tiny Cessna, the leather seat swallowing her whole. "Think you could fly one of these someday?" he'd asked, eyes twinkling. She'd grinned and said, "I could fly it right now." Back then, the sky had seemed limitless. Somewhere along the way, the world had built walls around it. She looked again at the framed photo, her father beside a rusted airplane, smiling as if the world was still wide open. Maybe it could be, again. The next morning, Megan woke before dawn. The city was still asleep, wrapped in fog. She made coffee, opened her laptop, and searched for flight training schools near Seattle. As she scrolled through the results, an idea began to take shape. Not just a school, but a new kind of academy. A place where women could learn to fly without hearing, "You're not what passengers expect." She wrote down a few words in her notebook. Freedom, confidence, sky. Then underlined them twice. Later that afternoon, at the maintenance hangar, she ran into Sophie Delgado, a young woman in her mid-20s with short curls tucked under a grease-stained cap. Sophie worked as a mechanic, sleeves rolled up, hands quick and sure, as she checked the undercarriage of a training jet. She looked up as Megan passed. "Hey, Captain Holt," she said, grinning. "Heard you were up for chief pilot. Congrats." Megan hesitated, forcing a small smile. Didn't get it. Sophie frowned. Their loss. You're the only reason half of us even believe this place runs. There was an honesty in her tone that warmed Megan's chest. She watched as Sophie wiped her hands with a rag. The girl reminded her of herself years ago, hungry, driven, full of quiet defiance. You ever thought about flying yourself? Megan asked suddenly. Sophie laughed, surprised. Every day, but pilot school? That's way out of my budget. Megan nodded slowly, her mind racing. Maybe the sky she was supposed to create wasn't just for her. That night, as the last plane lifted off over the Sound and disappeared into the clouds, Megan sat in her car outside the hangar, engine off, notebook open on her lap. She wrote a single line at the top of the page, Blue Horizon Aviation Academy, a flight school for women who refuse to be grounded. The rain began again, soft but steady. She watched it trace paths down the windshield, thinking of her father's words, "Create your own sky." For the first time in a long time, Megan felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. Somewhere above the storm clouds, dawn was waiting, and this time she wouldn't ask for permission to reach it. The rain had stopped the next morning, leaving Seattle washed in pale sunlight. The streets shimmered, and the air carried that fresh, metallic scent of wet pavement and jet fuel drifting from the nearby airfield. Megan Holt parked her car near the hangar, thermos of coffee in hand, her mind still echoing her father's words from the night before, "Create your own sky." Inside the hangar, mechanics moved between aircraft, their overalls streaked with oil. The rhythmic hum of engines mixed with the distant chatter of radio traffic. Megan spotted Sophie Delgado crouched beneath a training jet, her small frame half hidden behind a toolbox. Sophie, 26, sharp eyes, brown skin that glowed under the morning light, was wearing a faded bomber jacket over her mechanic's uniform. A streak of grease marked her cheek, and her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd learned by necessity, not luxury. She had grown up in Tacoma, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse. Flying for Sophie had always been an unreachable dream, glimpsed through the sound of engines overhead. "Morning, Captain Holt," she greeted, sliding out from under the fuselage. Her grin was genuine, the kind that warmed even the cold metallic air. Megan smiled faintly. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep," Sophie replied, wiping her hands. "I've been thinking about that Cessna. It's almost ready for test flight, but we still need to calibrate the altimeter." Megan nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She looked around the hangar, the planes, the equipment, the space, and imagined it alive with energy again, filled not with skepticism, but with possibility. She turned back to Sophie. "Do you ever think about flying that Cessna yourself?" Sophie blinked, startled by the question. "Every day, but flight school costs more than my rent for a year. I barely make enough here to keep my car running." "Would you do it?" Megan asked quietly. "If you could." Sophie laughed softly. "Captain, if I had the chance, I'd be in the sky before sunrise." Megan's chest tightened at the conviction in the young woman's voice. She saw herself in Sophie 20 years ago, when she was all hunger and hope. "Then maybe it's time someone gave you that chance," she said, half to herself. Later that afternoon, Megan sat at a corner table in a small coffee shop by the harbor, laptop open, a swirl of notes and ideas filling the screen. She'd started sketching out a plan for what she now called Blue Horizon Aviation Academy. The name made her heart race every time she typed it. She listed everything she would need: hangar space, aircraft, instructors, licensing, startup funds. The list grew longer by the minute, and so did her doubts. She had savings from 2 decades of flying, but not nearly enough to launch a school. Still, the thought of staying silent under men like Ethan burned worse than any risk. As she stared at the numbers, her phone buzzed. It was her mother, Linda Holt, a retired high school teacher, gentle but pragmatic. "Megan," her voice came through the line, tinged with that familiar mix of concern and affection. "Sophie told me you're thinking about starting something new." Megan smiled despite herself. "Word travels fast." "Sweetheart," Linda said, "I know how stubborn you are, but starting a business isn't like taking off in a plane. You can't just hit autopilot." "I know, Mom," Megan replied softly, gazing out at the gray water beyond the window. "But I can't keep flying under people who think I don't belong in the cockpit. If I don't do this now, I'll regret it forever." A pause, then a sigh. "Just promise me you'll have a backup plan." "I promise." Megan said, though she knew she didn't. That evening, she called Laura Bennett, her old flight instructor from her Air Force days. Laura, now in her 50s, had retired early after an injury grounded her from combat flights. Still tall, confident, and radiating authority, she had become a mentor to countless women in aviation. When Megan told her about the academy, Laura didn't hesitate. "It's brilliant," she said. "The industry needs this, and you're the one to make it happen. I'll help however I can." Hearing that, Megan felt something inside her settle, like turbulence giving way to clear air. Over the next few weeks, Megan and Laura met daily, sometimes in cafes, sometimes in the dim light of the hangar. They built the blueprint for Blue Horizon, a program that wouldn't just teach women to fly, but to lead, to navigate the unspoken rules that tried to keep them grounded. Sophie joined in too, volunteering after her shifts. She learned how to manage paperwork, research grants, and even draft the Academy's mission statement. "It can't just be about aviation," Sophie said one night, eyes bright with determination. "We need to show women they belong here. Maybe bring in guest speakers, engineers, pilots, women who've broken barriers." Megan smiled. "And scholarships," she added, "for women who can't afford the traditional programs." They worked late into the night, coffee cups piling up beside stacks of notes. Slowly, the dream began to take shape, not just in theory, but in heart. Still, rejection became a constant companion. Banks called the idea too niche. Investors called it unsustainable. Each email that started with, "We regret to inform you," stung like turbulence. But every time she felt ready to give up, Sophie's voice would echo in her mind. "If I had the chance, I'd be in the sky before sunrise." One night, while Megan and Laura were reviewing proposals, Sophie rushed into the hangar holding her phone. "Captain Holt, you have to see this." On her screen was an email from the SOAR Foundation, a nonprofit that funded aviation diversity initiatives. Megan skimmed the words, her pulse quickening. "We are inspired by your proposal for Blue Horizon Aviation Academy. We would like to discuss potential funding for your first operational year." Megan froze, eyes wide. Laura grinned. "Well, Captain," she said, leaning back, "looks like you just found your wings." Megan laughed, the sound half disbelief, half joy. For the first time in months, she felt weightless. That night, she drove home under a clear Seattle sky. The city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. And for once, the horizon didn't seem so far away. The dream that had been refueled in a moment of heartbreak was now ready for takeoff. The old hangar at the edge of Boeing Field looked nothing like a dream. The paint peeled from its metal siding, and the smell of oil and rust hung heavy in the air. But to Megan Holt, it was the most beautiful thing she'd seen in years. She stood in the doorway, wearing a leather jacket over her pilot's uniform, boots tapping against the cracked concrete floor. Next to her, Laura Bennett, her mentor and business partner, studied the blueprint pinned to a wooden board, her silver hair tied back in a ponytail. Laura, 54, tall, with the calm authority of someone who'd commanded squadrons, spoke without looking up. "It's small, but it's got potential. 2 bays, enough space for 3 planes once we clear out this junk." Megan smiled. "Perfect. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to fly." A voice echoed from behind them. "Then let's get to it." Sophie Delgado appeared at the entrance, arms full of cleaning supplies and a rolled-up poster. She wore ripped jeans, an oversized hoodie, and work gloves that had clearly seen better days. "I brought reinforcements." Laura raised a brow. "Reinforcements?" Sophie grinned and pointed outside. 2 of her friends from the maintenance crew, one tall and quiet, the other short with a mischievous grin, were unloading boxes from an old pickup truck. "We figured you could use some help turning this scrapyard into a school." By sunset, the hangar looked transformed. Dust clouds hung in the fading light, the floor cleared, the air alive with laughter and music from a small speaker Sophie had brought. Megan stood at the center, staring at the empty space where planes would soon rest. Blue Horizon Aviation Academy. The name still gave her chills. The next morning, she sat in a small rented office near the airfield, laptop open, coffee gone cold. On the screen was the final agreement from the SOAR Foundation, a grant covering the first year's expenses. Wasn't much, but it was enough to start. Enough to believe. "Ready to sign it?" Laura asked, walking in with her usual steady presence. Megan nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she clicked accept. Laura smiled. "Congratulations, Chief." The title caught Megan off guard. "Chief? You're the founder of Blue Horizon. You've earned it." A warmth spread through Megan's chest. For the first time, the title didn't come from someone else's permission. It came from her own creation. A week later, they stood in front of a group of 5 women seated on folding chairs inside the hangar, the first class. The women were a mosaic of stories and dreams. There was Rachel Grant, a 55-year-old nurse who'd retired early after raising 3 kids. She wore a denim jacket and a nervous smile. "Flying's been my dream since I was a girl," she said softly. "Life just got in the way." Next to her sat Tina Lopez, a single mother in her 30s with determined eyes and a toddler's photo pinned to her keychain. "I'm here to show my daughter that she can do anything," she said. 2 young students from the University of Washington, Kim Nguyen and Brooke Wallace, shared a notebook, whispering excitedly about their first flight. And finally, Sophie, sitting at the back, her usual mechanic's uniform replaced by a simple gray hoodie and a spark in her eyes. Megan looked around at them, her heart swelling. "Welcome to Blue Horizon Aviation Academy," she began. "You don't just belong here. You're the reason this place exists." The women clapped softly, the sound small but full of power. Over the next weeks, life at the academy settled into rhythm. Mornings began with classroom sessions, navigation, weather systems, safety protocols, taught by Laura. Afternoons were for hangar work, pre-flight inspections, engine checks, and maintenance. In the evenings, Megan took each student up for practice flights in the single Cessna they'd refurbished with their own hands. Sophie, balancing her part-time mechanic job and lessons, barely slept. She'd arrive early, coffee in hand, reviewing manuals while others stretched. Her hands still smelled faintly of fuel, but her mind was sharp, hungry. One chilly Friday, after an exhausting day of flight simulations, Sophie hesitated by the Cessna. "Captain Holt," she said quietly, "what if I'm not good enough? Everyone else seems to catch on faster." Megan looked at her, the grease on her hands, the fatigue under her eyes, and saw herself, years ago, asking the same question to a commander who never answered. She smiled softly. "You ever notice how planes take off against the wind?" Sophie frowned, unsure. "It's the resistance that lifts them higher," Megan said. "That's what makes you ready. The hard part isn't flying, it's believing you can." Sophie exhaled slowly. "Then I guess I just have to keep flying against the wind." "That's the spirit," Megan said, patting her shoulder. Weeks turned into months. The academy gained attention on social media after Sophie posted a video of her first takeoff, the caption reading, "For every woman told she couldn't, this is for you." The clip went viral within days. Messages poured in from across the country, women asking about enrollment, sponsors offering small donations, journalists requesting interviews. Megan sat one evening in the office surrounded by paperwork, eyes wide at the flood of emails. "Laura, we're actually growing," she said, laughing in disbelief. Laura grinned. "Careful what you wish for, Chief. Now you'll have to keep up." But not everyone was thrilled. Across town in the glass headquarters of Northwest Air, Ethan Carter leaned back in his office chair, scrolling through an article titled "Women Take Flight: The Rise of Blue Horizon Academy." The headline showed Megan smiling beside Sophie, both standing proudly in front of their hangar. Ethan frowned. Something about the photo, about her confidence, made him uneasy. He'd dismissed her once, certain she'd fade into obscurity. But now she was making headlines. He closed the article, staring out of the window at the tarmac below. Maybe he'd underestimated her. Back at the academy, Megan locked up for the night. The airfield was quiet, bathed in orange light from the setting sun. Sophie was still there, sitting in the cockpit of the Cessna, running through her pre-flight checklist one more time, determination in every motion. Megan watched her through the glass, pride softening her tired face. The young woman who once fixed planes was now learning to fly them. And as the last light faded over the horizon, Megan whispered to herself, "This is what freedom looks like." She turned off the hangar lights, unaware that the real storm, the one that would test everything she'd built, was already forming just beyond the clouds. The morning mist hung low over the runway, curling around the hangar doors like breath on glass. Inside, the Blue Horizon Academy buzzed with the quiet energy of new beginnings. The metallic scent of jet fuel mixed with coffee and nerves. It was the day every student had been waiting for, their first solo flights. Megan Holt arrived before dawn, wearing her flight jacket and black boots, clipboard in hand. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, but a few strands had escaped, catching the orange glow of the sunrise. Despite the calm on her face, her pulse raced. Today wasn't just a test for her students. It was a test for everything she'd built. She found Sophie Delgado already inside, sitting in the Cessna's cockpit, her headset resting around her neck. Sophie wore her navy jumpsuit, sleeves rolled up, grease stain from last night's maintenance checks. Her usually steady hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the throttle lever. "Couldn't sleep?" Megan asked, leaning against the side of the plane. Sophie looked up, managing a nervous smile. "Barely. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing your voice saying, 'Trust the instruments.'" Megan laughed softly. "Then I must have been haunting your dreams." "Maybe," Sophie said, exhaling. "Or maybe I'm just scared to mess up in front of everyone." Megan stepped closer, resting a hand on the plane's frame. "Fear's part of flying, Sophie. The key isn't to avoid it. It's to learn how to fly through it." Across the hangar, the other students prepared too. Rachel Grant, the retired nurse, practiced her pre-flight checklist aloud, her voice steady but slow, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Tina Lopez double-checked her flight bag 3 times before laughing nervously and whispering, "If my daughter could see me now." Laura Bennett, their senior instructor, walked between them, clipboard in hand. Her presence was calm, grounding, the kind of confidence that filled a room without demanding it. "Ladies," she said, "today isn't about perfection. It's about trust. Trust in yourselves, in your training, and in the sky." As the first rays of sun touched the runway, Megan called out, "Let's line up." The engines came alive one by one, rumbling softly, their vibrations running through the concrete floor. Sophie climbed in, adjusting her harness. Her face was pale but determined. Megan crouched beside the window. "Remember," she said, "you've got this. You've earned this moment." Sophie nodded, her voice small. "Copy that, Captain." The radio crackled as Sophie taxied down the runway. Megan stood outside, headset pressed against her ear, watching every move. The Cessna rolled forward, faster, faster, then lifted, the wheels leaving the earth in one clean motion. Megan's chest tightened. For a heartbeat, time stopped. And then Sophie was flying. She circled the airfield once, twice, her voice steady over the radio. "Blue Horizon 1 maintaining altitude at 1,500 feet. "Copy that," Megan replied, her smile widening. Around her, the other students clapped and cheered, the sound mixing with the hum of the engine overhead. When Sophie touched down 20 minutes later, her landing was a little rough, but safe. The instant the wheels hit the ground, she burst out laughing, the relief and exhilaration colliding in one joyful sound. Megan jogged to meet her as she climbed out, tears in her eyes. "I did it," Sophie said breathlessly. "I actually did it." "You didn't just fly," Megan said, grinning. "You soared." By noon, every student had completed their first solo flight. The hangar was filled with laughter, high fives, and the occasional tear. Even Laura cracked a smile wide enough to surprise everyone. "You know," she said, "I've trained a lot of pilots, but I've never seen this much heart in one group." That afternoon, Megan sat in her small office, staring at the whiteboard, filled with names, flight hours, and lesson plans. The academy was alive, really alive. Applications were rolling in faster than she'd imagined. The viral video Sophie had posted a week earlier, her first takeoff, had already reached 500,000 views. Comments poured in from women around the country. "Where do I sign up?" "My daughter wants to be like you." Finally, a place for us. But success came with strain. There were bills piling up, maintenance issues, and not enough instructors to handle the growing number of students. Megan rubbed her temples. "We need help," she muttered. Laura walked in just then, reading her mind. "We're stretched thin. I can handle classroom sessions, but you can't do every flight test yourself." Megan sighed. "We'll hire more instructors, pilots who believe in what we're doing." Laura smirked. "You realize that's a tall order?" "Yeah," Megan said, smiling faintly. "But then again, so is flying." That night, Megan drove home under the soft glow of the Seattle skyline. The The city lights flickered on the wet roads, and the Space Needle gleamed like a lighthouse in the mist. She turned on the radio, catching the end of a local news segment. And in local headlines, a small flight academy led by veteran pilot Megan Holt is making waves in the aviation world. The all-female Blue Horizon Academy aims to bring more women into the cockpit. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Hearing her name on air, it felt surreal. She pulled over near Lake Union, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the water. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number from Ethan Carter. Message: "Congratulations, Holt. Seems like your little project is taking off. Let's catch up soon." Megan stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. The last person she wanted to hear from was Ethan, the man who once told her she'd never be chief pilot. But she couldn't deny the flicker of curiosity beneath her irritation. She typed a short reply. "Thanks, Ethan. Maybe someday." Then she slipped the phone back into her pocket, exhaling slowly. The night was quiet except for the distant hum of planes overhead. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was chasing the sky. She felt like she was part of it. By late spring, the Blue Horizon Aviation Academy was humming with life. The hangar that once echoed with emptiness now rang with laughter, radio chatter, and the mechanical whir of engines being tested. Megan Holt stood by the open hangar doors, the wind tugging gently at her jacket as she watched Sophie and Tina run their final pre-flight checks. The academy had grown faster than anyone expected. News stations had run stories about the women rewriting aviation, and their small team suddenly found themselves juggling 20 students, 3 rented planes, and a waiting list. It was a dream come true, and an exhaustion that never ended. Megan looked every bit the seasoned pilot, tall, calm, with steady eyes and a voice that carried quiet authority. But beneath the surface, she was tired. Her nights had become a blur of grant applications, maintenance reports, and sleepless what-ifs. "Hey, Chief," Laura Bennett called from behind her. Dressed in her olive green flight jacket and aviator shades, Laura always had a cool ease about her. "You've been standing there for 10 minutes. Watching or worrying?" Megan chuckled, rubbing her temple. "Little of both." Laura crossed her arms, following her gaze toward Sophie's plane. "You've built something incredible here, Meg. Don't forget to breathe once in a while." "I'll breathe when I'm sure this place can survive without me," Megan replied softly. Laura tilted her head. "You might wait a long time then." Before Megan could respond, the radio crackled to life. Sophie's voice came through, bright and confident. "Blue Horizon 1 ready for takeoff." Megan pressed the headset to her ear. "Cleared for takeoff, Blue Horizon 1. Winds at 8 knots, visibility clear. Make us proud." The small Cessna rolled down the runway, its wheels lifting cleanly into the sky. Megan exhaled as the plane climbed. Flying was the one thing that always made sense. Inside the cockpit, Sophie was grinning. The sky stretched endlessly before her, a soft wash of blue. For the first time, she felt like she belonged there. Her palms were steady, her focus sharp. But 10 minutes into the flight, a flicker on the instrument panel caught her eye. The oil pressure gauge was dropping. Her heart skipped. She tapped the gauge. It didn't move. "Blue Horizon 1 to base," she said, voice tight. "I'm reading a pressure loss, requesting confirmation." Static. Then Megan's calm voice. "Copy that one. Stay composed. Check temperature readings." Sophie glanced down. Temperature was rising. "Confirmed. I think we're losing oil pressure. Should I return?" "Affirmative," Megan replied, her tone steady. "Keep altitude. You've got this." Sophie turned the plane gently, but the engine began to sputter. Panic clawed at her chest. "Engine's losing power," she called, her breathing sharp. "Stay calm," Megan's voice came through the radio, unwavering. "Remember your training. Pitch for glide. Find a safe landing spot." Below, Megan's eyes locked on the small aircraft gliding lower over the forest edge. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't let it touch her voice. "Laura, call tower control. Get emergency on standby." "Already on it," Laura said, grabbing the radio. Sophie fought the shaking in her hands. Her father's voice flashed in her head. "You always dream too high, kid. Sooner or later, gravity wins." She clenched her jaw. "Not today." Fuel cut off. "Mixture idle." "Flaps down," she murmured, running through the checklist. Megan drilled into them. The ground was rising fast. Now, a small clearing ahead. She aimed for it. The Cessna hit the ground hard, bouncing once before skidding through the grass, dirt flying in a blinding storm. Then silence. Megan's breath caught. "Sophie, report status." "Static." Then, "I'm okay." came Sophie's shaky voice. "The plane's not happy, but I'm fine." Megan closed her eyes, a wave of relief washing through her. "Copy that. Sit tight. Help's on the way." Within minutes, she and Laura were in the truck, racing down the service road toward the smoke rising beyond the tree line. When they reached the clearing, Sophie was standing outside the battered Cessna, helmet in hand, eyes wide but alive. Megan climbed out and walked straight to her. "You did everything right," she said, gripping Sophie's shoulders. "You kept your head. You trusted your training. I couldn't be prouder." Sophie's lips trembled as she laughed. "Guess I passed the test." "You didn't just pass," Megan said, smiling through the adrenaline. "You graduated with honors." News spread fast. By evening, local reporters were at the hangar, filming the young mechanic-turned-pilot who'd saved herself with calm precision. The headlines read, "Trainee's heroic landing turns crisis into triumph." When the story hit social media, messages poured in again, this time not just from aspiring pilots, but from parents, teachers, and veterans, all inspired by the courage of one young woman who refused to panic when the world dropped out from under her. That night, Megan sat alone in her office, watching the footage replay on a small TV. Sophie stood beside the wrecked plane, eyes bright under the flashing lights. "I didn't think I could do it," she told the reporter, "but Captain Holt taught me something. Planes take off against the wind." Megan smiled faintly. Outside, the night was calm again. Her phone buzzed. A new message, this time from Ethan Carter. "Ethan, saw the news. Impressive work. Maybe I misjudged what you're building." Megan, "Maybe?" she typed back. "You think so?" Ethan, "Definitely. Let's talk. There might be room for collaboration." She stared at the words for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or sigh. Collaboration. With the man who once said passengers wouldn't feel safe under a woman's command. But maybe that was the point. Megan looked through the window where Sophie and the other students sat in the lounge, replaying the day's events, laughter echoing through the hangar. She whispered, "We're not done yet." And deep down, she knew the real flight had just begun. The Seattle skies turned gray again a week after Sophie's emergency landing, the kind of cold drizzle that blurred the horizon and made the runway shimmer like a mirror. The damaged Cessna sat in the corner of the hangar, its nose bent, its body scarred, but Megan refused to move it. She told everyone it would stay there as a reminder, not of failure, but of courage. Megan Holt paced across the hangar floor that morning, her boots echoing in the stillness. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back tighter than usual, her crisp blue jacket damp at the shoulders. She hadn't slept much since the incident. The Academy was receiving calls from reporters, aviation boards, and potential investors. Everyone wanted a piece of Blue Horizon now. "Chief," Laura Bennett called from the office doorway. She wore her aviator sunglasses pushed up on her head and held 2 coffee cups. "You look like you've been awake for 3 days." "I have," Megan admitted, taking one of the cups with a faint smile. "I keep replaying it." Sophie's voice on the radio, the silence after. "I can't stop hearing it." Laura's tone softened. "Meg, she's alive because of what you taught her. You did your job. She did hers." Megan sighed, rubbing her forehead. "The Academy's grown faster than I can manage. We've got new applications, news coverage, offers from sponsors. And I still don't know how to say yes without losing control of what we built." Before Laura could respond, the hangar doors creaked open. Sophie Delgado stepped in, her jumpsuit freshly laundered, but her hands still showing faint oil stains that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Her curls were pulled into a messy bun, and she carried a small bouquet of daisies wrapped in brown paper. "Morning, Captain," Sophie said shyly. "These are for you. And for the plane." Megan blinked, caught off guard. "For the plane?" Sophie grinned. "It earned them." She walked to the damaged Cessna and placed the flowers gently on the dashboard. "She saved my life." Megan smiled for the first time that day. "So did you." Sophie hesitated, then turned to her. "I've been thinking, maybe we should name her." "The plane, I mean." Laura folded her arms. "You naming machines now?" "Always," Sophie replied with a smirk. "How about Hope 1? Megan looked at the bent metal, the chipped paint, the bouquet sitting proudly in the cockpit. "Hope 1, she repeated softly. "Perfect." They stood together for a quiet moment, listening to the rain tapping on the metal roof. It wasn't just about planes anymore, it was about what they represented. Later that afternoon, the Academy received an unexpected visitor. A black sedan pulled up outside, sleek and gleaming despite the drizzle. When the door opened, Ethan Carter stepped out. He looked different from the man Megan remembered. Less smug, more careful. His neatly pressed suit was still there, but his expression carried something new: humility. Megan watched him approach, every instinct on alert. Laura noticed too and muttered under her breath, "Speak of the devil." "Captain Holt," Ethan greeted, extending his hand. "Quite the operation you've got here." She didn't shake it right away. "I'd say it's more than an operation. It's a movement." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's what I wanted to talk about." He glanced around the hangar, the students studying navigation charts, Sophie teaching a new recruit how to check the landing gear. "You've built something remarkable. My airline could use pilots like yours. We'd like to partner with Blue Horizon, recruit directly from your academy." Megan studied his face, searching for the catch. "You want to hire our graduates?" He nodded. "We're short-staffed, and frankly, your academy's reputation is better than most regional programs right now. I'll be honest, Megan, I underestimated you. The industry underestimated you." Laura stepped forward, arms crossed. "And now you want in on it." Ethan gave a half smile. "Let's just say I'd rather be part of the solution this time." Megan didn't answer immediately. She looked around the hangar, her hangar, the laughter, the learning, the hum of progress. She thought of all the years she'd fought for a chance like this, and now the same man who once told her passengers wouldn't feel safe under her command was asking to collaborate. Finally, she nodded. "If we do this, Ethan, it's on my terms. Equal pay, equal opportunity, no quotas, no token hires. My students don't need charity. They've earned their wings." Ethan extended his hand again, more sincerely this time. "Deal." She shook it. The moment felt strange, like closing a chapter that had haunted her for years. A week later, Blue Horizon signed its first partnership agreement with Northwest Air, opening guaranteed positions for qualified graduates. The celebration that followed felt surreal. The hangar was strung with fairy lights, the scent of barbecue and jet fuel mingling in the air. Sophie stood on a makeshift stage with a microphone, cheeks flushed with excitement. "I just want to say," she began, "a few months ago, I was fixing planes I thought I'd never fly. But thanks to Captain Holt and this academy, I've learned that limits are only real if you accept them." The crowd erupted in applause. Megan watched from the back, arms crossed, her eyes glistening. She caught Ethan's gaze from across the room. He nodded quietly, a silent acknowledgement. Later that night, after the celebration ended, Megan and Laura sat on the hood of a small aircraft outside the hangar, sipping coffee and staring at the stars. "You ever think," Laura said, "about what your dad would say if he saw all this?" Megan smiled softly. "He'd probably tell me to check the fuel levels and quit overthinking." Laura laughed, then grew quiet. "You really did it, Meg. You changed the game." Megan looked toward the dark horizon where planes blinked faintly against the sky. "Maybe, but the truth is, it wasn't just me." Inside the hangar, Sophie was helping new students fold maps and label instruments, her laughter echoing through the night. Megan whispered, "It's them. They're the future." And as the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and jet fuel through the open doors, Megan felt something she hadn't in years: peace and the calm certainty that her storm had finally passed. Summer unfolded over Seattle with clear skies and long golden evenings. At the Blue Horizon Aviation Academy, the once quiet airfield now buzzed with motion and laughter. Planes rolled out at sunrise, students filled the classrooms, and the hum of engines blended with the rhythm of a dream that had finally taken flight. Megan Holt stood by the office window, her reflection overlaying the view of the hangar. Her uniform was the same, navy jacket, silver stripes, but she looked lighter, calmer. The academy had grown beyond anything she imagined. They now had 30 active students, 3 fully restored planes, and a waiting list stretching halfway across the country. Inside the hangar, Sophie Delgado, now 26, wearing a crisp training uniform instead of her old mechanic jumpsuit, was briefing a new group of recruits. Her voice was confident, but warm, her gestures animated as she described flight procedures on a whiteboard filled with sketches of aircraft wings. Watching her, Megan smiled. Sophie wasn't just a student anymore, she was becoming a mentor. Laura Bennett, clipboard in hand, entered the office. "We just got confirmation from Horizon Air," she said, her voice carrying that steady mix of pride and disbelief. "They're officially hiring our first 3 graduates next month." Megan turned, eyes wide. "You're kidding." Laura grinned. "Wish I was." "They even mentioned a recruitment program just for Blue Horizon alumni." Megan exhaled, leaning against the desk. "You realize what this means, right? We're not just teaching pilots, we're creating a pipeline, a real path." Laura nodded. "You've changed the industry, Meg. They're finally noticing." That afternoon, the academy buzzed with celebration. Sophie gathered the students in the hangar, holding up a framed certificate from Horizon Air. "This," she said, "isn't just for the 3 of us who got in. It's for everyone here, for every woman who's ever been told she wasn't good enough." Applause erupted. Some of the women cheered. Others wiped away quiet tears. Megan stood at the back, her throat tight with emotion. She thought of her father, of the years she spent fighting invisible ceilings, and of that first conversation with Ethan, the man who once told her passengers wouldn't feel safe under a woman's command. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan Carter. "Congratulations. Horizon wants to feature your academy in their diversity initiative. You should come speak at the national conference next month." Megan stared at the text, her heart quickening. A national stage. The same industry that once dismissed her was now asking her to speak. Laura glanced at her. "What's that look?" Megan smiled slowly. "An invitation." A month later, Megan found herself standing backstage at the National Aviation Conference in Dallas. The ballroom beyond the curtain glowed under soft lights, filled with executives, pilots, engineers, and reporters. She wore a tailored gray suit, her hair down for the first time in years. Sophie had insisted it made her look like the woman who runs the sky. As she peeked out, her breath caught. Ethan was there in the audience, seated near the front, along with representatives from every major airline. She could see Laura and Sophie, too, sitting together near the aisle, grinning proudly. The announcer's voice boomed over the sound system. "Please welcome Captain Megan Holt, founder of Blue Horizon Aviation Academy." The applause rose like thunder. Megan stepped forward, the stage lights washing over her. She paused at the microphone, taking in the sight of hundreds of faces waiting for her to speak. "When I was 9 years old," she began, her voice steady, "my father lifted me into the cockpit of a small Cessna and asked, 'Think you could fly one of these someday?' I said, 'I could fly it right now.'" Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. She smiled. "It took me 30 years to realize what he really meant was, don't wait for permission to take off. The truth is, for women in aviation, the runway has always been there. We just had to build our own planes." She spoke about the early days, the rejection letters, the long nights in the hangar, the crash that nearly broke them but instead defined them. And then she spoke of Sophie. "There was a young mechanic," she said, voice softening, "who thought she could never afford to fly. Today, she's a commercial pilot, and she's sitting right there." The crowd turned as Sophie stood, her cheeks flushed, waving shyly. Applause filled the room again, louder this time. When the clapping faded, Megan looked out at the crowd, her voice steady and sure. "This isn't just my story. It's the story of every woman who's ever heard the word no and turned it into her own runway." The sky was never the limit. It was only the beginning. When she stepped off stage, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Laura was waiting by the curtain, tears shining in her eyes. "You nailed it," she whispered. Ethan approached next, offering a handshake. "You've come a long way, Captain." Megan met his eyes. "So has the industry." He nodded. "You were right. The problem wasn't women, it was us." "I'm glad you didn't listen." She smiled faintly. "I didn't build Blue Horizon to prove you wrong, Ethan. I built it so women wouldn't have to prove themselves at all." That evening, the ballroom lights dimmed and music filled the air as awards were handed out. When Megan's name was called for the Pioneer in Aviation Award, she froze, then slowly stood. The applause was thunderous as she walked to the stage again, accepting the crystal plaque engraved with her name. "This," she said into the microphone, her voice trembling now, "isn't mine alone. It belongs to every woman who dared to fly when the world told her to stay grounded." As she stepped down, Sophie hugged her tightly, whispering, "You changed everything, Captain." Megan smiled through tears. "No, Sophie. We did." That night, as they walked out under the Texas stars, Megan looked up at the sky, vast, infinite, and full of light. She thought of her father, of every no that led her here, and of the women who would follow. The wind was soft against her face, carrying the faint sound of planes taking off in the distance. She whispered, half to herself, half to the stars, "Looks like we've finally built our own sky." The air was warm over Seattle that morning, the kind of golden sunlight that felt like a promise. The hangar doors of Blue Horizon Aviation Academy stood wide open, letting in the summer breeze and the hum of distant engines. Inside, laughter echoed against the metal walls. Banners hung from the rafters. 5 years of flight. Thousands of dreams in motion. Megan Holt stood near the runway in her dark blue flight jacket, the same one she'd worn on her first day as founder. Time had softened her features but sharpened her eyes. She looked across the airfield where her students, now pilots, were preparing for a small air show organized to celebrate the Academy's anniversary. Beside her, Laura Bennett leaned against a wing, her hair now streaked with more silver, but her smile brighter than ever. "You realize," she said, "we've gone from 1 beat-up hangar and a Cessna to 6 planes, 3 hangars, and a waiting list longer than the runway." Megan chuckled. "Yeah, and not 1 day of rest since." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Laura said, sipping her coffee. The hum of laughter drew their attention. Near the fuel station, Sophie Delgado stood surrounded by a small group of younger students, her brown curls tied back, her uniform pressed. She looked different now, more confident, more grounded, but her enthusiasm was the same. On her sleeve, the new badge of First Officer at Horizon Air gleamed in the sunlight. Sophie was helping a teenage girl adjust her flight headset. The girl looked nervous, her hands trembling slightly. "Hey," Sophie said, crouching to meet her gaze. "First time in the cockpit?" The girl nodded. "Yeah, I keep thinking I'll mess something up." Sophie smiled. "You won't. You just need to trust yourself. The sky doesn't care who you are. It only asks that you believe you can fly." Megan watched from afar, pride swelling in her chest. She saw herself in that young girl, nervous, uncertain, waiting for permission that would never come. As the air show began, students took turns performing short demonstration flights, each greeted by cheers from families, journalists, and even representatives from several major airlines. The once overlooked Blue Horizon was now a respected name, a symbol of progress in aviation. Midway through the event, a small ceremony was held inside the hangar. The walls were adorned with photos, the first class of 5 students, Sophie's emergency landing, the ribbon cutting with the SOAR Foundation, and Megan's speech at the National Aviation Conference. Laura took the stage first. 5 years ago, she began. This was just a dream scribbled on a napkin. Now it's a community, a family, built on courage and persistence. And none of it would exist without the woman standing right here. The applause rose as Megan stepped forward. She smiled, a little overwhelmed, gripping the microphone tightly. "When I started Blue Horizon, I just wanted a place where women could learn to fly without having to prove they belonged. But it's become something bigger, something I never imagined. You've proven not just that women belong in the cockpit, but that we belong at the forefront of change." Her gaze moved to Sophie, who was standing near the back, beaming. "And to see our graduates flying across the country, training others, and coming back here to inspire the next generation, it reminds me why we built this." A murmur of appreciation spread through the crowd. Megan took a deep breath. "Years ago, someone told me passengers wouldn't feel safe with a woman in charge. Today, I can tell you, our passengers don't just feel safe, they feel inspired." The crowd erupted into applause. After the ceremony, the students gathered outside for a group photo. The backdrop was a perfect Seattle sky, blue and cloudless, as if even the weather was celebrating with them. Megan stood in the center, flanked by Laura on one side and Sophie on the other, with dozens of smiling faces behind them. As the photographer counted down, Sophie whispered, "Captain, do you ever miss flying commercial?" Megan smiled. "Sometimes. But then I look at all of this, and I realize I never stopped flying. I just changed the passengers." They laughed as the camera clicked. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, the airfield was quiet again. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and amber. Megan locked the hangar doors, then walked toward her office. Inside, the lights were low, the air still carrying traces of celebration. On the shelf above her desk sat a row of framed memories. Her father Dan beside a small Cessna, her first flight team, her photo with Sophie holding the Pioneer in Aviation award, And right in the center, the newest edition, a picture from today's ceremony, signed by all her students with a single message written in bold blue ink. Because you believed, we flew. Megan ran her fingers over the words, tears stinging her eyes. She whispered, "You did more than fly. You changed the sky." There was a soft knock. At the door, Sophie appeared, holding a small gift box. "One more thing before you go," she said. Megan smiled. "What's this?" Sophie handed it to her. Inside was a silver keychain shaped like a wing, engraved with the words, "Blue Horizon 001, for the woman who taught us to take off." Megan blinked back tears, her voice trembling. "Sophie, this is beautiful." Sophie shrugged, smiling. "You gave me my first flight. Consider this your wings back." Megan stood and hugged her, a long, grateful embrace. "Thank you," she whispered. As Sophie left, Megan walked outside once more. The runway lights glowed faintly in the twilight. She stood there, watching a single plane climb into the fading sky, one of her students heading toward her first night flight. Megan smiled, whispering into the breeze, "Keep flying, girls. The sky's yours now." The wind carried her words into the distance, mingling with the steady hum of engines. And as the plane disappeared into the stars, Megan turned toward the quiet hangar, the place where doubt had once lived and dreams had learned to rise. The sky was no longer the limit. It was home.